Good morning. Today is Tuesday, February 28th, last day of the month. And this is a meeting at Senate Natural Resources and Energy. It's a few minutes after 10. And we are resuming work on the committee amendment or an amendment related to the Affordable Heat Act, S5. We had conversations and testimony from the office, the Equity Office, and over the weekend, a memo arrived with some additional feedback. So I'd like to work with the committee to go through that memo this morning, adjust if we see fit the draft amendment to S5 that we already started. And then because the bill is in process and going to be voted out of appropriations this afternoon, to catch that wave. But Senator Kitchell has offered to take our suggestions, port them into the bill when they do their committee report on S5. So we'll have a single report other than ours, but make the adjustments. So practically speaking, it's helpful logistically. So with that, I'd like to, everyone has a hard copy in their desk of a memo dated February 24th. One from Susanna Davis, and the subject line is summary of testimony in S5 from the prior week. Anyone who's watching at home can find that memo posted to the website. So with that,
what date did you reference?
It was sent to us. It came in Friday night, Friday the 24th. The 24th. Okay. Okay. So let's work our way through that memo. We already started an amendment based on our conversations, say that we would like to make improvements from the equity point of view. We'll further amend that, I'm guessing, and then we'll have Mr. Chakowski has finally offered to draft over lunch, and so that the appropriations committee will have it when they convene after lunch. So thank you, Mr. Chakowski. With that, let's go through that document. You may want to pull up your copy of the bill as stored out so you can see where these things insert. Would you like to lead off and sort of walk through the memo with us, and that will help us set up a routine rhythm there.
Ellen Chakowski, Office of Legislative Counsel. We're looking at a memo I did not draft. I had no part of, but I'm going to walk you through it. Did you want me to? You want me to start on the first page? You want me to start? So the first page lays out things that the Office of Racial Equity supports in S5. Do you want to start there, or do you want to start with the suggestion?
For the sake of time, which we don't have a lot of, let's go down to the bottom of the page. It says suggested changes for consideration. Again, there.
Yes. So yeah, starting at the bottom of page 1, suggested changes. The Office of Racial Equity wishes to raise concerns that draft 4.1 does not contain any language that refers to how the PUC will address the upfront costs of upgrading clean heat measures. Low and middle income housing may need financial support to install upgrades like heat pumps and weatherization service. I'm sorry, did you want me to read this line by line, or how should I proceed?
Tell us what the proposition it solves.
I think that your sort of summary is what we're looking at. We can slow down and look at details. If we will downshift if we need to more detail, but I think so I don't know if there's any.
So that is, so the first part that I just read through is their concern, and then go on to cite some statistics supporting this, and they end with, without adequate consideration, it is likely these things could be unaffordable and racially inequitable. So they're asking for specific provision related to upfront costs.
So everyone should feel free to jump in, but my sense is that we have named steadily and throughout the bill an emphasis on making the program affordable for low and moderate Vermonters. And, I honestly sort of, and the program design is yet to be fully developed, so it feels like a premature criticism of the program because we haven't gotten as far as the design of the program.
Thank you. I would also make the case that is sort of that lowering the upfront costs across the board is the point of the bill. And we have carved out intentionally benefits for low and moderate income Vermonters. And so that is very much on our radar.
So anyone else have a comment, suggestion on that? So I think acknowledging the concern, I think to the best of my knowledge, we've addressed that concern. And I suggest then we go to the next one at the end of page 5, 1.
Sure, I just want to flag also that I think the Office of Racial Equity was looking at draft 4.1. Your committee did vote out draft 6.1. So there are, the line numbers don't match up exactly, but I can help orient you. So the next suggestion is on page 5. It's related to the definition section. The office recommends that the legislature keep in mind the definition of low and moderate income. Based on area median income published by HUD, may not adequately describe a household's total socioeconomic picture. The legislature should be open to refining these definitions in order to best meet Vermont population. The office recommends using an AMI measurement that accurately addresses the income disparities between demographic groups and have low and high socioeconomic status. That may mean using a statewide AMI or locally relevant AMI depending on what local income data shows.
So I'm looking back at our edits from the last time we worked on this section. We wrestled with this one because we didn't want to latch onto a definition that would somehow become an obstacle to having this program integrate well with other programs. And because there is, again, a long development phase to the bill, my sense is that we have reports back, 2 of which are check back reports that are going to deal with participation for impacts on participating and non-participating individuals, the costs, etc. I think we're all aware of we need a good working definition. I think we have a good working definition to start with. And if there are adjustments, we'll learn about them as the program is developed. I'm not passing this off. I just don't think we don't know enough to be more specific than I think. Okay. But the other thing, Senator McDonald's point was, let's not just ask the PUC to design it for us, which was our original starting point, because it's a policy decision at heart, how you define low moderate. So this is our, my take is this was our best way to express it, and if we learn more in the next 2 years, we will make adjustments through statute. So
I had thought that we had changed it to state area median income. Am I misremembering that?
Let me get this one. 6.1.
It's just area median income published by HUD.
I agree with your sentiment that we can learn from it and keep keep that in mind and revise as we need.
I had statewide written in with a question mark on it and then, Xed it back out again.
Oh, okay.
So I know it was under
We talked about
discussion.
it.
So, and I looked into this a bit, I'm not an expert, but I did look up the HUD. HUD area median income does have Vermont specific information, it's set by county. So there are state median income calculations that have been done using different calculations. So, but it's not just, it is area based, but it is set by the federal government.
So we content to move on. Right, so page 7, lines 14, 15.
And it's actually page 7, line 9, essentially 8 and 9. And I think this is one of the first amendments that was in the proposed amendment.
So that we may have already addressed this.
Potentially.
Okay,
The Office of Racial Equity supports the language with PUC conducting outreach using in plain terms. However, the Office of Racial Equity is concerned that the timelines for public outreach does not factor in time needed to translate outreach materials into languages other than English. The PUC must be given adequate time and monetary resources to translate their outreach materials for Vermonters who speak another language other than English. Office recommends including specific language that requires the PUC to conduct outreach with considerations for language assistance services such as translation of documents and presence of interpreters. And so what was in the proposed amendment that you reviewed last week would be amending page 7, line 8 and 9 to include the phrase translation services available. So to ensure the understanding among obligated parties, the commission shall publicly provide a description of the annual requirements in plain terms with translation systems services available.
So that was an amendment, just think people are going to keep track. The 4 instances of amendment that Senator Watson brought to us last week. Okay. Any further discussion on that one? Okay, so we're adding with translation services available. Thank you. Next, page 11-ish, lines 15, 16.
The language of the bill requiring obligated parties to retire carbon credits specifically from low and moderate income customers will force companies to collect data from customers. The office recommends that the legislature consider how companies will collect and said income data. Will income disclosure be required from all customers or just low and moderate income customers? Income disclosure requirements for only those customers would place a higher burden of disclosing private information on people of color. If the legislature chooses to continue with the language that will require income data collection, the office recommends the legislature add specific detail about how income will be collected, stored, and by whom. Security measures required to safeguard customer income data and making income collection required for all customers no matter their income level, so that there isn't a disproportionate burden.
I think we have an amendment that satisfies all these suggestions, but we do have an amendment on that section, correct? The second instance of amendment.
So I would also add that in the clean heat credit section later, any clean heat credit requires, it doesn't differentiate between low and moderate credits and other credits. And so the bill is currently neutral on that. That is in a different section though. So I would just flag that it doesn't necessarily specify if low and moderate income customers will need to provide more detailed data. It doesn't currently say that. I'm not sure if that is how it would play out. But it is currently vague on that point.
But it's, since it was, the concern, I think, was that there could be a differential burden on lower moderate income Vermonters. Since the language is neutral, I was wondering if we would be prejudging that that burden would be greater for low and moderate income Vermonters. There is already, I mean, I'm thinking my way through for programs for which people qualify for, such as LIHEAP. We already ask people to disclose information, not involuntarily. It's if you want to participate in receiving benefits from the program, you disclose information in some way, shape, or form in order to take advantage of the program. So that seems like a legitimate thing for the state to request. Burlington Electric Department did say that for their program, they had a self-certification program, which would be about as maintain as much privacy as possible of self-disclosure. So a self-attestation to being qualified. So again, I'm not prejudging what they would have. There is still the language that Senator Watson brought a week ago or so was in the same neighborhood, and just wanted to read through that. So in subdivision B2, inserting a new sentence after the third sentence to read as follows. That's the end of that paragraph. It says, data collected regarding income shall be kept confidential.
And so I would just like to flag that I don't know if it fits in this paragraph.
That line.
Yeah, because if you read the rest, this is the paragraph that sets up 16% from customers with low income and 60% from moderate income. And for these groups, at least half will come from installed measures. Examples shall include weatherization, heat pumps, et cetera. The commission may identify additional measures that qualify. So then it would say data collected shall be kept confidential. And so I don't think that seems like a non sequitur to me.
Is there sort of a better place for it, maybe higher up hierarchically so that it applies more generally throughout the section? It seems suitable.
Well, it possibly could go in some section H actually, so not higher, but
Okay.
farther.
Under
Because-
reports,
No, under record retention.
That makes sense.
But
Oh, sorry.
yeah.
On page 14 is records G or maybe the newest version has records B H.
records are records are G. Yes, sorry.
That's fine.
So it could go there. You probably want to make it more specific, maybe customer income data shall be kept confidential.
Does it merit its own section, or does it fit into one of those? In your estimation, is there one of these that's most suited to carrying it, or would it be useful to just have it its own?
So there is the fourth amendment on the proposed amendment is similar language. And it is going to occur later in the bill as well.
So you want to where we just jumped to sub G, correct? Or
Yes, well,
enforcement?
No, I was talking about the records section. I think it could go there. I'm gonna be honest, I hadn't thought about how to structure this,
Where-
so.
Best place.
So I think it possibly could go in the record section, which is G. And I'm looking at draft 6.1, which is the as recommended version.
Okay,
So it could go there. It also could just go later in a different section related to the clean heat credits and what information is required as part of disclosure. It also potentially could go in the language regarding the tax department disclosures. So there are actually many places this could go, but where I have put it seems like not. In D2 seems like one of the places it doesn't make sense.
doesn't fit particularly well, okay. So I'm thinking about trying to step up to a higher level, so it applies throughout a section or something like that. So that we don't have to call it out in each sort of instance, each opportunity to either keep data confidential or not.
So,
Does that make sense?
well, so then my initial reaction to that is that the section that we're in right now is the section that lays out clean heat compliance, which is primarily for the obligated parties.
Right.
So I guess the question is who you're asking to keep data confidential.
Sarah Watson?
So it seems to me that we want, like we're saying, Senator Gray, that we want it to apply to everyone, that it's, well, let's be specific. It should apply to the Public Utility Commission, it should apply to the DDA, and it should apply to any fuel, well, really any entity that is doing the work, that gets the data to provide the subsidy, if that makes sense. So I guess I'm seeing three sort of parties that need to be keeping data confidential. One possibility, so because it's G there on page 14, it seems like it's just about the Public Utility Commission. I'm not opposed to, I mean, it would be nice if we could say it once and just have it apply to all three. That would be perhaps sufficient. I'm not opposed to it being in G and elsewhere. And just make it clear, because in 8125 is about the default delivery agent. It should be clear that they should also be keeping this data confidential. So happy to put it in multiple places if it's easier.
So I'm thinking on the fly about where you know what, let's do this. Put a pin in it, keep going. We'll double back, figure out the optimal place for insertion. The concept we support, our struggle at the moment is to see the best place to put it in. So how about that? So we will know that the current amendment, which has the concept we support, data collected regarding income shall be kept confidential. So we'll revisit that to see where it is best inserts. Okay, great. Let's keep going. Thank you.
The next proposal, so the office recommends ensuring that the amount of penalty for non-compliance is high enough for obligated parties don't treat as a cost of doing business. So the legislature should consider whether 3 times the cost of a credit is high enough to ensure compliance. And the proposed amendment, in the third instance of amendment, raises the penalty from 3 times the amount of a credit to 4 times the amount.
Do you have, I've heard of treble damages many times over. I don't know if that's kind of a standard legal formulation. I don't know that I've ever seen 4 times. So I just don't have a perspective on, and to the point of achieving the end, which is that the penalty be sufficient to deter people or to inspire people to comply. I don't know in this case if 3 versus 4 ends up doing that for us. So, do you have any information you can share with us?
I mean, things that come to mind, I don't know what it currently is under the RES program. I don't know that off the top of my head. Trouble damages is actually a different concept entirely. And it's usually as part of a lawsuit. Trouble damages are awarded in civil penalties for sort of egregious acts. So that's kind of a different concept under the law than when you fail to meet a deadline. So I don't really have any other.
So, Ross, do you have anything more you want to say on that one? That's fine with leaving our edit 4, and the bill still has to. I'm happy to be responsive to the concern, and so this will be something we'll flag for the House. They may want to take more testimony on damage provisions. So we're for the third instance of amendment, which includes striking the word 3, inserting the word 4, stand. Okay, thank you. Let's go on to the next one.
So the next proposed change relates to the clean heat credits. The office has been clear in the past about carbon credit trading being a solution that elevates the potential for lack of process equity in state policies. However, the language in 8127 could be modified to ensure that obligated parties are not allowed to sell or trade clean heat credits to each other, only purchase credits from a designated default delivery agent or companies that provide services that create clean heat credits. Such a vertical trading system would ensure that the obligated parties buy credits that offset carbon emissions from the weatherization business that are generating the reduction. The office is concerned that without guidance, obligated parties with greater levels of capital will simply purchase trade credits to each other to meet their obligations rather than funding the creation of new credits. It keeps, there's more, but that's,
Sure.
Yeah.
Any conversation on that one? I don't know that we haven't established a system,
Yeah.
so I don't know that this feels like it is prejudging the outcome of the way the credit system will operate. And from my point of view, let me check with all of you, we're trying to establish a technology neutral, relatively open system so that different actors participate and will be flexible and innovative with the idea of keeping the cost of credits as low as possible by having as many people provide services into that system.
So that is the system trading between the rules.
A system of trading, I think, yeah, there will be rules that spell out how they're calculated, who handles them, how you acquire them, retire them. I'm not really thinking that so much as a trading system, it's sort of like a marketplace. If you need credits, you'll offer them, you'll purchase them from, and if you have credits, you'll offer them with the marketplace. So,
It's lunch trade, lunch tickets that may or may not. That's what they do. It may not be legal, but that's what they do.
I don't understand your point.
When you have a credit which has a value, it's a financial instrument. And once you have financial instruments, do you say you can't use this financial instrument as a financial instrument? So lunch ticket. Well, if we say that only people that have lunch tickets that are from certain families can, it's dicey. Where did you get that ticket from? I'm not telling.
Thank you, Chair Bright. So I have a few general thoughts about this proposal, which I so appreciate from the Office of Racial Equity. And one of the things that I'm feeling about this particular recommendation is that we have the Equity Advisory Group. We've got them purposefully reviewing the work of the TAG, which I think would address this concern if it were to arise. So to your point, we are not yet in a place where I think we can understand the dynamics that are being described here. I think it's an important flag, and I hope that it's something that we keep an eye on, or the group that is tasked with doing that keeps an eye on it. The other thing that I'm struggling a little bit with this is it's in opposition to some of the points we've heard from the administration themselves. So I guess I'm feeling a little bit conflicted with, we're hearing one portion of the administration telling us some serious needs around data. And then we're also hearing from an internal organization within the administration kind of, I think, having a bit of tension with that recommendation. So I'm wondering if there is if there is a way that we can get a better sense of if these recommendations being moved forward would make the administration more amenable to the bill, or if we're actually working against some of the requests that the administration has made around the bill in general. So that's just one tension that I'm feeling with each of these changes. I don't want us to work against having the governor veto this by meeting the recommendations of the Office of Racial Equity, is what I'm trying to say.
Your reminder about the Equity Advisory Group, which I think is explicit in the bill. We're not relying on the Environmental Justice Advisory Group being stood up. They participate from the beginning, pre-filing right on through the ongoing operation of the bill. Leads me to conclude we've put people with the right kind of knowledge and concerns in the right place to participate in an ongoing basis to address any kind of unforeseen possible negative consequence. So I'm content to leave the system we're beginning to operate. We'll learn more as we go.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that anyone else on this particular one, to page 21, the credit section. So I marked mine to let it stay as is. That leads us to 22, recommendations related to eligible clean heat measures. So back to you.
So the office recommends making it more permissive for what measures should be considered eligible. So they recommend language in this memo that would read list of eligible measures, clean heat measures delivered to or installed in Vermont to be investigated by the Clean Heat Standard Technical Advisory Group shall include, and then I guess, or could be eligible clean heat measures delivered to or installed in Vermont may include. So your committee has had this discussion before about whether that list is permissive or not.
I think we settled on shall, correct?
Yes.
Make sure that's
Chair, what was our advice from Rich Howard on how to deal with this phase of weatherizing? Or did he skillfully avoid it?
thinking back, trying to remember the way, I have a sense that we've looked at this in a very similar way, that we want it to be an open list that can be amended over time. But that we wanted the certainty of saying from the outset, all these things will be eligible. Which is why we swung back to staying with a shall. And now I'm trying to see the role of the Clean Heat Standard Technical Advisory Group. I don't know that that's actually what we don't have. Isn't there an equity advisory group? Just trying to make sure we're doing the right.
Tag.
Yeah, the tag. I'm trying to see how this fits in. My sense is that the tag is already involved making exactly these recommendations, but
Yes.
that's who's
So
helping us.
the language that I skipped over in the memo says they want to make clear that the tag is empowered to recommend against the list of technologies.
I see. Okay. Now,
So yes, the tag is already empowered and would be working on this already, but they're suggesting making it more permissive so that it isn't a shall.
right. So this is a committee. We're revisiting a previous committee decision. Anyone want to change where we? We did a lot of thinking back and forth. And I think I'm confident that the thinking was sound, and the technical advisory group is going to be deeply involved in assessing every measure. We also had provisions to say if there's an unintended negative consequence, the technical advisory group has a way of weighing it. I'm just trying to think about if that group found an unintended negative consequence, is there a way for the group to address that? And I would think the way they would do it is in the carbon intensity scoring. There's a negative consequence, something might well have a less favorable score.
Yes, well, that is exactly how I envision there being a check to this list. Like, let's say one of the items on the list is a bad plan from a carbon perspective, or I suppose any other perspective in terms of that, like review of consequences thing, right? So I imagine that there's going to be a schedule of clean heat measures and then how many credits they're worth. And the recourse, what this does, as I see it, is it creates things that have to be on that schedule. Like these things have to be allotted some amount of credits. The recourse is that you don't want somebody to do it, it's worth 0 credits.
Yeah.
Like it still appears on the list, it's just that, you know, it's not worth as much or anything at all if you want it to be not eligible. So I'm comfortable with the assets.
Well said, better said. So with that, let's continue.
Okay, the final recommendation on this page is raising the per diem amount for the wooding groups. Currently, it's set to the $50 per diem, which is the statutory per diem.
I know that this one to me is an appropriations matter. Yes, per diems are being discussed more broadly this session, at least 2 ways. One is pointing out that there are, I think, 5 groups that receive per diems other than the dollar standard. And should this program should members of this group be considered to become a 6th category? Other one is that there's a general review of $50 per diems as being so dated that with inflation, they haven't been revised for inflation. Do you happen to know the last time we changed? You know when it went to $50 off the top of it? Or if you've done a research center report?
I can tell you at least how far back. Well, actually, I can probably tell you, I went on to the District 3 Environmental Commission. So I was pretty- That was in '85, and it was $35 a day. And it was during the time that I was there that it went up to 50. And I left in '89. So in '89, it was $50.
Okay, so we're talking about at least 34 years at $50.
Yes, I think I do agree, it's somewhere in that, time period. I would also just say that last year, the General Assembly passed an amendment to the per diem statute, that gives agencies, discretion to budget for more than $50. So within the 32 VSA 1010, this is a change, so it hasn't happened yet, I don't think, but if the agency wants to budget for more than $50 for their per diems, they are allowed to do that.
So since we're not the appropriations committee, I think what I'd prefer to do is leave this as is, but have a conversation with the appropriations committee. When I'll deliver our amendment to them, and while they're raise this as an issue and say, have you considered, at least if it's not to come with a different, a more supportive level of subsidy for this group? Are you going to adjust for inflation, the standard per diem? There's an inflation calculator, that I'm not gonna try to pull out and use right now, but it'd be interested to know what $50 would have become. All right, with that, thank you. Page 4, it is 1, 2, 3, 4. Other comments related to the group?
So there are other existing equity-related groups. The office recommends the legislature determine whether this equity advisory group in S5 is a tasked and finished group or whether it will exist in perpetuity. The office's preference is to set an optional sunset date to clarify the length of time members are expected to be committed to the equity advisory group. Setting a sunset will allow for reevaluation.
So like, Sarah, what's
My understanding was that we intend for this group to exist in perpetuity, and I also assume that there will be this. It doesn't say this, but I assume that they'll set up some kind of terms, and so somebody's term is up, you get to be either reappointed or whatnot, and so somebody wouldn't have to serve forever, but maybe I'm wrong on that, but. Once you step off, but my understanding is that it's intended to exist in an ongoing way, and I'm okay with that.
anyone else? I would agree. It's like, we know there's an environmental justice equity group being established, but it's not fully fledged up and running. Maybe someday we wouldn't have 2 different equity groups, but for now, I'm feeling like this is a belt and suspenders move. We're establishing our own equity group so that we're absolutely certain that it's covered. And given that we don't know how things will unfold, I think having it in perpetuity, we can always say they've done their job, we don't need to do that anymore, but we're going to merge the environmental justice equity group will now play that role. So I think it's good to keep it in perpetuity at this point. Next item.
Next isn't a concrete suggestion for language, but they point out that the categories under the groups are not mutually exclusive. And so, like, for example, renters are represented, and that could change over a person's time, or a person from a state agency could be a renter. And so they ask that the PUC take care when nominating members to ensure all the categories are well represented.
Senator Watson?
I feel like that this is, like, yes, so noted. I agree, and I also don't feel like there's anything that needs to change with the language for that suggestion.
Sorry, okay, so are you saying that you think we ought to make an adjustment?
No. I think if this is the kind of suggestion that's like, yes, they're asking us to take note and take care, and I think that is well received,
Sure.
but does not require a language change.
Just to the line 30, page 35, line 17, 19. By the way, I did pull out my handy dandy inflation calculator, $50 from 1989. Is the equivalent of $123.52 in January of 23. So we have indeed fallen behind the times. Okay, thank you.
So the next suggestion related to page 35 does make a suggestion. So the office recommends replacing the language that the PUC seek input from equity advisory group with stronger language that elevates equity as a key consideration in the rulemaking process. The PUC must be required to follow guidance of the equity advisory group, not just seek input from them. Empowering members of the group will ensure that they're actually part of the rulemaking process and not tokenized. And so this is actually on page 34, line 15, and it's part of the rulemaking process. The PUC shall seek input from the equity advisory group on who to invite to the public meetings and solicit comments from.
Okay, Senator Watson.
So as a part of their suggestion, I mean, they're saying that they must be required to follow the guidance of the equity advisory group, and I don't see putting, they're an advisory group, like they should give advice, and that should be considered along with the advice from other groups, and I am wary to just say that the group must automatically follow the advice of a particular, of any one group, that it's all perspectives and priorities need to be weighed together. So I would be inclined to not say that the equity advisory group's advice must supersede the advice of any other group. That's where I'm at.
Maybe I agree. I mean, it's an advisory group, but it's going to be one perspective out of a lot of testimony. If it doesn't make sense to me that we would have all the rest of the apparatus of the technical advisory group bringing in data, having conversations, hiring consultants, and then that could all just be overridden by one particular group. I'm wondering if instead of seek input, we could be more affirming though by saying must give consideration to. I mean, seeking input's one thing. Must, I think it just says a little more clearly what that we want them to take that input and give consideration to it.
Also, I mean, this is a very specific section on page 34. It's who to invite to meetings. So, I mean, the other way you could potentially structure it is just say that the equity advisory group is allowed themselves to invite people to meetings. I mean, we're talking about like a very niche, this is like a very narrow part of this whole process. So seeking the input on who to invite to meetings, really. But you could restructure that sentence. And it could read the commission shall invite organizations and communities that have been recommended by the equity advisory group to the meetings.
Just trying to make sure I'm looking at our most, looking at.
Page 34,
Yeah,
subsection 4.
Because the comments are on prior draft, are being a little flipping between versions to make sure I'm looking at the right. Late edits are a great way to introduce an error. Senator Watson.
I like your suggestion around changing it to well, actually, I think because this section is so specific, I think I may not have strong opinions about deferring to the equity advisory group on who to invite to meetings, as long as it's not exclusive. Like if they're broadening the scope, then great. I can't imagine that they would be like, please don't invite, any particular party or kind of demographic for people. So I'm happy to make this accommodation if the committee is.
I'm actually still trying to make sure I see exactly where this requested language. I had 4.1 and 5.1, which actually became our 6.1 at the end, in front of me.
Subsection
Where's the
4.
phrase seek input appear?
Do you see the advertising section?
Yes.
It's the paragraph above it.
Paragraph.
Subsection 4.
Thank you. For anyone who's trying to do this.
Yeah, and so this is in section 6, which is the rulemaking process that the PUC needs to abide by.
Thank you, Senator Watson, for pointing out where the sort of the scope of where this seek input when change applies to it. It's simply who's invited to participate in the public meetings and opportunities to comment. Can we make that language stronger while also adding Senator Watson's caveat that it shouldn't be to the exclusion of any party?
So the language currently reads, the commission shall seek input from the equity advisory group on organizations and communities to invite to participate in the commission's public meetings and opportunities to comment. So I just gave you 2 options on possible ways to strengthen it, but you may need to rewrite the whole sentence. I'm not sure.
Can you share one of the
So
ways
you could, the first thing I mentioned was you could reframe the sentence to just empower the equity advisory group to invite people to meetings themselves. Or something along the lines of the PUC shall invite any organizations or communities the equity advisory group recommends, or
shall invite recommended by the equity advisory group. Senator Watson?
My inclinations go with the second of those 2 recommendations, and the reason is because the commission, the PUC, is in the business of advertising. Like they're the ones that are used to doing that. The equity advisory group, that may not be their wheelhouse to invite groups. I imagine that they may be able to promote existing advertisements, but to let's just be inclusive of who is doing, of the parties being invited already in the process. The advertising process.
I'm sorry, was that an addition at the end? I was trying to draft in my head. So here's what I think it might say. Okay, so the commission shall invite organizations and communities recommended by the Equity Advisory Group to participate in the commission's public meetings and opportunities to comment. And were you adding something else? No.
Well, I might say in addition to organizations or communities, commissions already going to invite, so that it's more inclusive rather than, well, maybe we don't need that addition. Because this is not a narrowing, it's not saying you will only invite these people.
Right.
Then, okay, then we don't need that additional bit at the end, sorry, thank you.
No,
Just need to talk through that.
yeah. I guess we haven't read through the section in a while, but you did make some changes to this section above, which does say that the meeting shall be open to everyone, including stakeholders, members of the public, and potentially affected parties.
So 4 changes to the commission shall invite organizations and communities recommended.
Recommended by the Equity Advisory Group.
By the Equity Advisory Group. We have this other thing of what are they invited to participate in the commission's public meetings and opportunities. Great, thank you very much. So let's make that change for the amendment. And that brings us to funding a timeline for rule development, page 4 of the memo.
Yes, the office recommends the legislature increase the funding to the PUC. It does not include potential costs of language access services such as interpretation or translation, and doesn't include any potential costs of compensating participants at these events. It could include direct compensation such as childcare and meals. The legislature should consider whether 16 months to adopt a rule is enough time. Sorry. Yes.
We should consider that.
Yes.
Involuntary editorial.
I know, I'm sorry. I agree, is what I'm trying to say. I think this is, and I have said this before, it is a very tight timeline. And they go on to say that it needs to include conducting comprehensive, inclusive outreach, including people who may need language access services. Yes, 16 months is an ambitious timeline for this.
I think we've acknowledged all along. And, there's an
Yes.
there's an urgency to the matter we're addressing at
Yes.
the same time. So we're managing 2 urgent situations.
Are we talking about a timeline to come up with the rules or a timeline to put the rules into effect? Speaking to challenging.
Develop the rules with adequate public participation.
So I'm feeling like it is an ambitious timeline. We worked closely with the PUC to lay out the pre-filing program as well as a post-filing rulemaking. Establishing an equity advisory group that's integral to the whole process. And to me, it represents a fair and balanced best faith effort to have all the parties that we need to in the process. The other thing is, at the same time, in terms of supporting other measures that could be supportive to enable people to attend, for instance, providing childcare at a meeting. I know that the PUC has mentioned just those sorts of provisions before. I think Department of Public Service, I think in some of their outreaches, discussed the same thing. So I know there's an awareness of the need to provide services that we didn't used to consider for quote unquote traditional public buildings. And then the last thing is there's a request to appropriations to appropriate more money in order to address the concerns really. Overall, I would think this memo. So with that, I think that means for the end of this memo, other than to double back to the somewhat tricky issue of where do we want to express direction, where do we want to provide more direction on keeping records confidential, which we have in two places right now in our amendment, namely so we have an amendment from last week. For instance, the amendments to relate, the second and fourth instances relate to data collection and confidentiality.
Thank you. I found a couple other places, since there are really three kinds of parties that we want to keep data confidential, I found 3 spots. Now, to be fair, that may not be the preferred method, like if we could just call it out once and say, you know, these 3 parties, you should keep it confidential, or I could go ahead and suggest 3 spots in the bill, whatever is the preference.
Well, so you're drafting and you know the best way for us to put policy ideas in. Do you have a suggestion?
Well, so I did just want to revisit that the 4th instance of amendment, the proposed amendment, was adding language in the credit section. So I don't know if that was one of the things you were going to mention, Senator Watson. And so,
Oh, maybe it is. Yeah, sorry.
no, yeah, so it's proposing to add language, which it would be on page 26 of the final draft. 8127L2. The credit registration system shall require entities to submit the following information to receive the credit, which is a list of information, and then the proposal is to add language there that says data collected regarding customers or tenants shall be kept confidential. So that's one potential option.
And can you give some of the draft number, page number, line number, please?
Page 26,
Okay.
starting on line 10.
The system shall require.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
it would be a new sentence after that sentence.
Okay, and so I'm thinking that we're good on that because we talked about keeping records confidential. And we need to, I just want to make sure. So you're pointing out that's where this would insert the 4th instance of amendment.
Yeah.
If I may, so that applies to anyone who gets credit. So that would include the DDA and any of the obligated parties seeking to do the work themselves. So that does cover both of those parties. And then we keep the other one somewhere, maybe move it to G, we're good. All 3 parties are covered.
So let's go back and look at the one around G, or ask council to move it in that neighborhood to the most appropriate spot. We know the idea, exactly where to place the new sentence.
I'm a little confused on it.
Yes,
If
sir.
you get credits, that's not kept confidential. Is it?
No, but the data collected as part of
Yeah, okay,
the credit, yeah.
Was that a low income customer?
The
Was it
fact that they're
high?
getting credit is not confidential.
Right,
The data,
because we call out 16%, we need to be able to track where the work was done for what kind of income level. So we need at least to be able to verify that.
And
So,
And I liked the language that you used earlier, Alan, about customer. I wrote it down, it was like customer income data shall be kept confidential. I think that was,
Right, that maybe is more specific.
yeah,
Okay, well, so in the second instance of amendment, I had drafted data collected regarding income shall be kept confidential. But,
I think it's more specific, like,
okay,
because it's the customer data,
I mean, that's the area of sensitivity, it's
Yeah.
customer, private customer information.
as opposed to like the income of, say, the PUC, or whatever it's. Or,
Okay, so in both the second and fourth instances, or use the phrase, customer data,
customer income data.
customer income data.
So, all right, so on page 14, can I just read G and see if this fits? So, page 14 of draft 6.1, records, subsection G, which is line 1. The commission shall establish requirements for the types of records to be submitted by obligated parties, a record retention schedule for required records, and a process for verification of records and data submitted in compliance. So no, actually, I don't think it goes there.
no.
Because this is primarily regarding how much heating fuel they sell and what types of heating fuel, I think, not yet about credits.
Is it possible to say that all customer income in some place in the bill, all customer data shall be kept confidential by the following entities, or all entities that participate in the program. Or even to enumerate who they are, the PUC, the department, the obligated parties, and any delivery agent. Make a list of those actors that are part of the program, and just say that all customer income data shall be kept confidential.
Yeah, I guess
Other than,
another,
well, we have to add a caveat, right? Other than to satisfy the requirements of operating the program. And they do have to be able to share in order to make sure they report back to the default delivery agent. And the delivery agent has to then be able to report to the PUC. Mr. McDonald,
What was the bill that we were working on all last 10 days or so in finance that dealt with confidentiality, which we had a kind of a boilerplate statement that any state agency participating in this was subject to the same confidentiality requirements as the tax department. I mean, it was, we did this in the last couple of weeks over there in finance. I just don't remember the bill.
off the top of my head, I don't either.
We didn't invent it, it was given to us by the drafters.
Okay. Senator Watson?
Thank you. I am wondering if we can add to the instance, this last instance where it says data collected, right now, it's a suggestion, data collected regarding customer or tenant. Well, yeah, so basically this last instance, could we not just add to it, customer income data shall be kept confidential by obligated parties, the PUC and the GDA.
Challenge is I think we're down inside of section.
yeah, so yes, that is in the credit section, and I do think it logically makes sense there. I think to Senator Gray's earlier point, Maybe just like a new subsection under the D equitable distribution section and just make it a subsection 7.
Right, or we can in one place express that.
I don't think it's necessary there, but if you want it farther up in the bill, it can be there.
Well, I'd say for now, it's a workable solution. And it can be revisited by us and others after the bill, but at least we have addressed it explicitly in the bill in a way that it covers all the sort of forms of exposure.
And you want me to list all of the parties?
Yeah, so let's pause and think that through as a committee. So we have the PUC department, the DDA, then any entity performing delivery clean measures. Any entity delivering clean
A&R.
measures actually covers it.
A&R.
What is A&R involved in?
For tracking, they would be reporting anything.
I think they're gonna, as I understand it, they're always going to get, point of contact for them is getting the greenhouse gas inventory data. So
they would be like.
So we cover entities delivering clean heat measures. That will include everyone who has contact with customers. You see, anybody that. So that's a relatively concise way of.
You want the obligated parties?
Sure, I mean, I think. Yeah, right, because an obligated party may be exposed to that data even if they don't end up performing it. Okay, great, thank you for that. All right, so we have, if you'll please revise our S5 amendment that would have been offered by 5 individual senators, because it's no longer, the bill's no longer in the committee. When I go to approach this afternoon, and it would get delivered twice over by Ms. Chakowski, by me, and while I'm there, I'll raise the issue around the inadequacy of per diems, knowing that it's a bigger conversation, but I think it's probably interesting information to share that $50 you were paid in 1989 have to be $123.52 today.
Or Revere got $50. Right.
Yeah, $50.
Yeah, well, there was a, started after midnight, so we got a slight upgrade.
Good work. And Senator,
Thank you, Chairman Bray. I also think the translation services piece can also be talked about in the broader context too. I know we received a report on how we can offer translation services in a more robust way as a state. So I do also think that we can couch that conversation in some respects there.
Do we need to vote on any of the changes to this metrics?
yes, thank you very much. I mean, even though we're doing it sort of informally, it would be good to pause and do that. We're not going to see final language, although I think we will work through all the provisions that we want to cover.
Taking a form.
No, I think we can straw poll ourselves
Yep,
to
that's not.
know where we're at as a committee. So all those in favor of advancing these amendments to the bill through via the appropriations committee, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
So distinctly heard him say that.
So no, we thank you everyone for working through it in a timely way. I know we're working with a short time, so it's a challenge to go slow enough to pick up everything we need to. And glad that we came back to this again. I will connect with you after committee just to make sure that I know when things are ready to approach, so that when I talk to them, you have an amendment in hand. Yep. Okay. So, we are gonna go back to S, 100, but we've also just been churning along. We haven't had any, we came up here from the floor, like it's 11:17. So we just take a 3-minute break to 11:20, and then we'll start.